October 15th, 1963. The charade soundstage at Universal Studios Paris was buzzing with the controlled chaos of a major Hollywood production. Elegant salon furniture was positioned perfectly under the warm lights. Crystal decanters caught the artificial sunlight streaming through fake windows. And in the corner, almost forgotten among the props, sat a magnificent 1920s Steinway grand piano. Black lacquer so perfect it looked like still water. Keys that had been tuned to concert pitch even though no one expected them to be played. Cary Grant, Hollywood's most sophisticated leading man, was taking his afternoon break between scenes. At 59, he moved with the same effortless grace that had captivated audiences for 3 decades. His gray suit was impeccable, his silver hair perfectly styled, but there was something different about him during this production, something lighter. Working with Audrey Hepburn had that effect on people. From his position near the prop table, Cary noticed movement at the piano. Audrey sat on the bench, her famous profile silhouetted against the artificial window light. Her fingers were moving across the keys, but no sound emerged. She was practicing fingering exercises on the silent keyboard, her hands dancing through scales and arpeggios with a precision that seemed almost unconscious. Curious, Cary approached quietly. Audrey was so absorbed in her silent practice that she didn't notice him watching. Her technique was flawless. Each finger curved properly, her wrists held at exactly the right height, her posture erect but relaxed. This wasn't the casual keyboard familiarity of someone who'd taken a few childhood lessons. This was the muscle memory of serious training. "Can you actually play?" Cary asked, his voice carrying that familiar transatlantic accent that had charmed moviegoers for decades. Audrey looked up, startled from her concentration. For just a moment, something flickered across her face. Not embarrassment, but something deeper. Something that looked almost like pain. "A little," she said quietly. "Just hobby level. Nothing special." But Cary Grant hadn't survived 30 years in Hollywood without learning to read people. The way Audrey's hands had moved across those silent keys wasn't hobby level. The precision, the automatic corrections, the unconscious perfection of her positioning, all of it spoke of years of serious study. "Would you mind?" he asked, gesturing toward the piano. "I'd love to hear you play something." What happened in the next 12 minutes would change how Cary Grant saw Audrey Hepburn forever. But to understand why, we need to travel back in time. Not to 1963 in that Paris soundstage, but much further. To a world of privilege that would be shattered by abandonment, then destroyed by war, but where music would become the thread that held a little girl's soul together when everything else fell apart. Audrey Kathleen Rustin was born on May 4th, 1929, in Brussels, Belgium, into a world of crystalline perfection. Her mother, Baroness Ella van Heemstra, came from Dutch aristocracy stretching back centuries. Their mansion on Avenue Louise was filled with original paintings, antique furniture, and the kind of refined luxury that most people only saw in museums. Young Audrey's childhood was orchestrated like a symphony, every detail planned to create the perfect aristocratic young lady. Piano lessons began at age 5, not because Audrey showed particular musical aptitude, but because it was what aristocratic children did. A proper lady must know how to entertain guests. She must be able to play Chopin after dinner, to provide elegant background music during tea, to demonstrate the cultural refinement that separated the upper classes from everyone else. Audrey's first teacher was Madame Dubois, a severe woman with steel gray hair who had trained the daughters of Belgian nobility for 40 years. In the music room of their mansion, with its soaring ceilings and perfect acoustics, 5-year-old Audrey learned to curve her tiny fingers over the keys, to keep her wrists loose, to read music before she could read books properly. But Audrey discovered something unexpected in those early lessons. Music wasn't just a social skill for her, it was a language. When she played, something inside her opened up. The melodies seemed to speak directly to her heart in ways that words couldn't reach. By age 6, she was playing simple pieces by Mozart. By 7, she had progressed to Schubert. Her natural musical intelligence was remarkable, and Madame Dubois began to push her harder, sensing genuine talent beneath the aristocratic requirements. Then in 1935, when Audrey was just 6 years old, her world exploded. Her father, Joseph Rustin, vanished. Not gradually, not with explanations or preparations. One morning he was there, reading his newspaper at breakfast, discussing business matters with Audrey's mother. The next morning his chair was empty, and he never came back. Documents discovered decades later revealed that Joseph had been involved with fascist organizations, attending meetings that aligned with the dark ideologies spreading across Europe. But 6-year-old Audrey understood none of that. She only knew that her father, who had listened to her play piano every evening after dinner, who had applauded her small performances, who had promised to buy her a piano of her own someday, was gone. The music lessons stopped. Not officially, but practically. Audrey's mother was too devastated, too busy trying to hold together the ruins of their life, to care about piano practice. The music room, which had once filled with Audrey's playing every day, fell silent. The piano sat unused, its keys growing cold, while a little girl wondered if she had done something wrong to make her father leave. In 1939, believing the Netherlands would remain neutral, as it had during World War I, Audrey's mother moved them to Arnhem. It was supposed to be safe, a quiet Dutch city where they could rebuild their lives away from the political turmoil consuming Europe. They were catastrophically wrong. On May 10, 1940, German forces invaded the Netherlands. Within 5 days, the country had fallen. Audrey Hepburn, the girl who had once practiced scales in a Brussels mansion, now found herself living under brutal Nazi occupation. The early years were difficult, but survivable. Audrey continued her ballet training at the Arnhem Conservatory, clinging to artistic dreams. But she also did something else. In hidden locations, in secret gatherings organized by the Dutch resistance, she began to play piano again. Not for pleasure, not for social refinement, but for survival. These underground concerts raised money for the resistance. They provided hope for people living under occupation, and for Audrey, they became something else entirely, a way to transform pain into beauty. Her technique, refined during those aristocratic childhood lessons, became her weapon against despair. When she played Chopin's nocturnes in a resistance safe house, she wasn't just entertaining, she was declaring that beauty could survive even in the darkest times. That the culture the Nazis sought to destroy lived on in the hearts of those who remembered. Then came the winter of 1944-45, the Hunger Winter. After the failed Allied operation at Arnhem, German forces cut off food supplies to punish the Dutch population. Over 20,000 people starved to death in just a few months. Audrey, whose fingers had once danced across ivory keys in a heated mansion, now dug tulip bulbs from frozen ground to eat. Her weight dropped to barely 90 pounds. Her body began consuming itself to stay alive. But even during those terrible months, when death seemed more likely than survival, music sustained her. In her mind, during the longest nights, she played through the pieces she had memorized. Chopin etudes, Mozart sonatas, Schubert impromptus. The music existed only in her memory, but it kept some essential part of her alive when everything else was dying. When liberation finally came in May 1945, Audrey was 16, severely malnourished, forever changed. The girl who had dreamed of becoming a ballet dancer discovered that malnutrition had damaged her body too severely for professional dance. But her fingers remembered. Her musical memory was perfect. The hours of practice from her aristocratic childhood, combined with the emotional depth carved by wartime suffering, had created something remarkable. She had become a pianist of extraordinary capability, even if no one knew it. Years passed. Small acting roles, Broadway success, Roman holiday, sudden stardom. But Audrey never spoke publicly about her musical abilities. The piano remained something private, something connected to too much pain and loss. When interviewers asked about her childhood training, she deflected with charm and modesty. "A little piano," she would say, "nothing special." And now, on this October afternoon in 1963, sitting at a Steinway grand piano on a movie set in Paris, Audrey looked up at Cary Grant and repeated those same words. "A little piano, nothing special." But Cary persisted with gentle curiosity. "Come on," he said, settling into a nearby chair, with that casual elegance he wore like a comfortable suit. "Play something, anything. I promise I'm not a critic." The request hung in the air between them. Around the soundstage, crew members continued their work, but several had noticed the conversation and were beginning to drift closer. There was something about the moment that suggested something significant was about to happen. Audrey hesitated. Her hands rested on her lap, and for just a moment her carefully composed expression revealed the battle happening inside her. To play seriously would mean opening a door she had kept closed for years. It would mean touching something that connected directly to her deepest memories, her deepest pain, her deepest strength. Finally, she turned toward the piano and lifted the keyboard cover. "All right," she said quietly, "but don't expect too much." Her hands found their position over the keys with the automatic precision of decades of muscle memory. She chose Chopin's Etude Op. 25, number 11 in a minor, a piece known as Winter Wind for its swirling, storm-like passages. It was an ambitious choice, technically demanding and emotionally complex. Most pianists needed years of serious study to attempt it properly. The first notes emerged from the Steinway with crystalline clarity. Simple at first, a gentle melody that seemed to match Audrey's modest disclaimer. But within 30 seconds, something began to change. The music grew more complex, the technique more demanding. Her left hand established a steady, powerful bass line, while her right hand began the piece's signature rapid passages. And then, without warning, Audrey Hepburn disappeared. The elegant movie star, the sophisticated actress, the carefully composed public figure, all of it fell away. What remained was something raw and real and utterly authentic. Her body swayed slightly with the music's rhythm. Her face, no longer conscious of observers, reflected every emotional nuance of Chopin's composition. Her fingers moved with a speed and precision that seemed to defy physical laws. The music that poured from the piano was not hobby-level playing. It was not the careful, tentative performance of someone with basic training. This was master-level artistry. The kind of playing that filled concert halls, that moved audiences to tears, that required a lifetime of dedication to achieve. Cary Grant, who had been settling casually into his chair, sat up straighter. His expression shifted from polite interest to genuine amazement. Around the soundstage, work gradually stopped. Lighting technicians paused in their adjustments. Script supervisors forgot their clipboards. Even the film's director, Stanley Donen, emerged from behind the camera to witness what was happening. For 12 minutes, Audrey played with a level of technical mastery and emotional depth that transformed the movie set into a concert hall. Chopin's Winter Wind filled every corner of the space. The rapid ascending passages, like ice crystals dancing in freezing air. The powerful bass notes, like thunder rolling across frozen landscapes. But beneath the technical brilliance was something even more remarkable. The story of a woman's life told through music. You could hear the privileged childhood in the piece's elegant phrasing. You could sense the abandonment in moments where the melody turned lonely and isolated. The war was there too, in powerful, dramatic passages that spoke of struggle and survival. And threading through everything was something ineffable, a depth of feeling that could only come from someone who had transformed genuine suffering into transcendent beauty. When the final notes faded into silence, no one moved. The soundstage, which had been bustling with activity just minutes before, was absolutely still. Even the usual background hum of electrical equipment seemed muted, as if the building itself was holding its breath. Cary Grant stared at Audrey with an expression of complete bewilderment. This was a man who had worked with the greatest stars of his generation. He had acted opposite Grace Kelly, Katharine Hepburn, Ingrid Bergman, women of extraordinary talent and sophistication. But what he had just witnessed transcended anything he had encountered in 30 years of show business. Audrey slowly lifted her hands from the keys and rested them in her lap. For a moment, she seemed almost surprised to find herself on a movie set, as if the music had transported her somewhere else entirely. Her eyes, those famous, enormous eyes that had captivated millions of moviegoers, glistened with tears she hadn't expected. "My God," Cary said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "That was conservatory level, concert level." The words hung in the air like a question. Around them, the crew remained frozen, sensing they had witnessed something unprecedented. This wasn't an actress displaying a hidden talent. This was a world-class musician who happened to make movies. Audrey wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, a gesture so natural and unguarded that it reminded everyone present that beneath all her elegance, she was simply human. Music kept me alive, she said quietly. During the war, when there was no food, no heat, no hope, I played in my mind, every piece I had memorized. It was the only thing the war couldn't take away from me. The statement contained volumes. In just a few words, she had revealed the true source of her extraordinary ability. The music that had begun as aristocratic training had become a survival tool, a way to preserve sanity and hope in circumstances that destroyed many people entirely. The technical mastery came from childhood privilege. The emotional depth came from unimaginable suffering. Together, they had created something extraordinary. Cary Grant understood immediately. His own life had been marked by early poverty and abandonment, experiences that had shaped his drive for perfection and success. He recognized the particular quality that comes from transforming pain into art, from using suffering as fuel for transcendence. "Why don't you perform?" he asked. "With talent like this, you could fill Carnegie Hall." Audrey's smile was gentle but tinged with sadness. "Because acting chose me," she said simply, "and because music is too personal. When I play like this, I can't pretend to be anyone else. There's no character to hide behind. It's just me, completely exposed." The insight revealed something profound about Audrey's artistry. Her acting ability came partly from her capacity to access deep emotional truth, the same capacity that allowed her to play Chopin with such devastating beauty. But music demanded even more vulnerability than acting. It required her to open herself completely, without the protection of a role to inhabit. As the crew gradually returned to work and the normal sounds of film production resumed, Cary Grant remained in his chair, still processing what he had witnessed. His understanding of Audrey Hepburn had been fundamentally altered. The elegant actress he thought he knew had revealed herself to be something far more complex and remarkable. Years later, when asked about his most memorable experiences working with other stars, Cary would always mention that October afternoon in Paris. Not the scenes they filmed for Charade, as wonderful as they were, but the 12 minutes when Audrey Hepburn played Chopin and revealed the hidden depths of her artistic soul. She wasn't acting, he would tell close friends. There was no performance, no pretense. She was simply sharing a piece of herself that most people never get to see. It was the most honest 12 minutes I ever spent with another human being. The piano was closed after that afternoon, returned to its role as an elegant prop. But everyone who witnessed Audrey's performance carried the memory with them. It became one of those Hollywood stories that gets passed down through generations. Not because it was scandalous or dramatic, but because it was true. In a business built on illusion, Audrey Hepburn had offered something absolutely authentic. And in doing so, she had reminded everyone present that the most beautiful moments in life come not from pretending to be something we're not, but from having the courage to reveal who we truly are.